In a glittering ballroom filled with wealth and prestige, where every chandelier sparkled, and every guest carried an air of superiority, a single unexpected moment was about to unfold, one that no fortune, no amount of power, and no status could control. A billionaire, proud yet burdened, watched his disabled son from afar, believing he would always remain on the sidelines of life. But when a waitress, an unassuming black woman, working quietly in the shadows, extended her hand and invited the boy to lead a dance, the room froze. What happened next would not only silence the crowd, but shatter the walls of prejudice that had silently ruled his world. The evening had been meticulously planned. The billionaire had spared no expense. Marble floors gleamed under golden lights, the orchestra swayed into elegant melodies, and the city's most powerful figures filled the hall. For many, it was a night to celebrate influence and status. But for Richard, the billionaire host, it was more complicated. Hidden behind his commanding presence was his son Daniel, a boy of just 10 years, confined to leg braces that made even simple movements difficult. Daniel rarely smiled at such gatherings. He sat at the edge of the dance floor, watching others move with a rhythm his body could not replicate. To most, he was invisible, a child written off by privilege and pity. To his father, he was a constant reminder of fragility, a contrast to the empire Richard had built through ruthless ambition. Among the waitstaff moving gracefully between tables was Maya, a young black woman, working long hours to support her family. She carried trays, endured dismissive glances, and remained unnoticed in a room that thrived on appearances. Yet Maya's eyes often lingered on Daniel, sensing a loneliness she herself knew all too well. The music swelled, couples twirled across the floor, and Daniel sat still, clutching the edge of his chair. Then came the moment that would change everything. Maya set down her tray, knelt beside him, and with a warm smile, offered her hand. The room paused, conversations faltered, whispers spread like wildfire across polished tables. Why would a waitress, a woman whose very presence many barely acknowledged, dare to step into the spotlight, especially with a disabled boy? At first Richard bristled. His instincts screamed against it. He worried his son would stumble, humiliate himself, become the subject of pity. He feared the judgment of his peers, the headlines that might follow, the silent ridicule lurking behind every champagne glass. But as Maya gently helped Daniel rise, something extraordinary happened. Daniel's hands trembled, but his eyes lit up. For the first time, he wasn't being pitied, he wasn't being hidden, he was being chosen. The orchestra seemed to soften, adjusting unconsciously to the fragile rhythm of the boy's steps. Maya didn't lead, she followed. Every move was his, every hesitant shuffle embraced as though it were a grand performance. Around them, the silence grew heavy with unspoken prejudice. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, muttering under their breath about impropriety, about a waitress daring to upstage the event. A few sneered at the spectacle of a black woman in the arms of a billionaire's disabled son, and yet others began to lean forward, drawn into the authenticity of what they were witnessing. Richard's chest tightened. For years he had built walls of power and wealth to protect himself from vulnerability, but those walls began to crack as he watched Daniel laugh, truly laugh, for the first time in years. Each step, though uneven, echoed like thunder in Richard's heart. The dance floor, once filled with glittering couples, had now cleared. Every eye in the room was fixed on the small boy and the woman who had dared to see him. Daniel, wobbling yet determined, moved with a joy that silenced every whisper. His braces clinked softly against the polished wood, but the sound blended into music more powerful than any orchestra could produce. For Maya, it wasn't about defiance, it was about dignity. She saw a child who needed to be seen, not hidden. She surrendered her role as leader, letting Daniel's hesitant steps set the rhythm, celebrating every small victory as if it were perfection. Richard felt something break inside him, the weight of expectation, the fear of judgment, the pride that had blinded him. It all crumbled in that instant. His son was no longer a symbol of weakness, he was strength personified, and the woman who had shown him this truth was someone society dismissed as insignificant. Applause erupted. It began tentatively, a single pair of hands, then another, until the entire hall roared with thunderous clapping. Some clapped to mask their discomfort, others because they were moved beyond words. Richard, however, remained still, his eyes fixed on his son, his heart unraveling with every beat of the music. When the music finally faded, Daniel leaned against Maya, breathless but glowing. The boy had not merely danced, he had led, commanded and conquered his own limitations in front of the very people who had once overlooked him. Richard walked toward them, each step heavier than the last. For the first time, he didn't see a waitress serving tables or a son defined by disability. He saw two souls united by courage and dignity. He saw humanity stripped of prejudice, stripped of wealth, stripped of barriers. In that moment, Richard understood that his empire, his fortune, his power, all of it meant nothing, if he could not recognize the worth of every human being, regardless of color, class, or ability. The night ended not with deals struck or power displayed, but with a lesson etched into the hearts of all who had witnessed it. Some guests left changed, others resistant, but none could claim indifference. As Richard held his son close, his eyes met Maya's. No words passed between them, yet the message was clear. She had given him back not just a son, but perspective, humility, and hope. And so the story of that night lived on, retold not as a tale of wealth or grandeur, but as proof that sometimes, the most powerful voices come from those the world refuses to hear, because true change begins not with power, but with the silent courage to see humanity in its purest form.